TDG Toledo, Bridges, with your host, Doni Miller, connecting our community with information about issues and opportunities.
Good Sunday morning and welcome to Bridges. My name is Doni. I'm so glad to have you with us on this sweltering weekend. We're going to talk about something, though, that will take your attention away from the heat. There's a conversation going on in this community, stretching from the halls of City Council to the quarters of some of our most influential service agencies in this community, and that is what's actually going to happen to those agencies that provide services to the homeless, those shelters and other supportive services. We're talking about that today in great detail, and please know that this is the first of at least two conversations on this very complicated but very important conversation. We're talking about the subject this morning with two of the premier service providers in this community. We're talking to Kyle Grief, who is the Executive Director of Focus. Thank you so much for being here. And Renee Palacios, who is the Executive Director of Family House. I did you second because I was going to get your name wrong. And so it's Palacios, yes. So I got it. It took me a minute, but I got it. Thank you guys so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
This is complicated. This is
yes,
extraordinarily complicated. But we really want to say to people several times throughout this discussion this morning that while it is complicated, it's important that you pay attention to this conversation, that you find a way to be a part of this conversation, because it in effect affects this whole community.
That's right.
Would you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Let's start with just a little tutorial for people, just on the acronyms of two agencies that I know are significant in this conversation. The first is TAAEH, T-A-A-E-H, Toledo Area Alliance to End Homelessness.
That's right.
Could somebody explain to me what that is exactly?
Sure. Well, it is a service provider group. We work together to overcome barriers for clients. We are an alliance. I've served as chair this past year, and again, I will serve as chair as we move into next year. Renee has been on the executive committee as well. We have done a lot of educating around the changes that are taking place with federal funding and state funding. And we are the coordinators of the point-in-time count for homeless folks.
Which actually identifies the number, an approximate number of those folks who are homeless.
That's
yeah, we're
right.
going to talk about that a bit before we leave today.
Okay.
Yeah, and all of the agencies, or most of the agencies that provide services to those who are homeless, are part of TAAEH?
Yes.
Okay. And is how is that related to TLCHB, Toledo Lucas County Homelessness Board?
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. The Homelessness Board is the planning group for this community's continuum of care to move people from street homeless to permanent housing. They take data that is provided through a required homeless management information system. They analyze it, find gaps in services, try to address those gaps, and also ensure that funding streams are being addressed and looked at through request for proposal process for federal funds.
Are providers, service providers, a part of the Homelessness Board?
Yes. I, as the chair of the Toledo Area Alliance to End Homelessness, I sit on that board, but we also have one designated seat for somebody that's elected by the members of TAAEH to sit there.
All right, and are these the two primary planning agencies for the group of service providers?
Yes.
Essentially they are. Essentially they are. Okay.
Yes.
All right, good. So now we've got the backstory, I think, pretty much. So here's the discussion as I hear it out there. There is one philosophy that says that the direction of the service providers needs to change to a more rapid rehousing philosophy. And then there's the other conversation that I hear that says people who are advocating for that really don't get it. And in the middle of this is the funding. And which direction does the funding go? Does it go away from those organizations that are providing this service toward this more rapid rehousing philosophy, or does it stay where it is? Lourdes Santiago, who is the executive director, the director of the Department of Neighborhoods, who's managing the process which allocates much of the city block grant money, which is at issue here. Okay, stay with me, pen and paper if you need to. It does get a little complicated. The block grant money, which is at issue here, has said, is an advocate for the rapid rehousing philosophy, as I understand it from what I've researched, and has supported the continuation of funding for the shelters, but through a different and more temporary vehicle, right?
Well, I'd like to speak to a little bit of that because I might be able to break this down a little bit so people understand. The service provision has changed on how we are to deliver services to homeless people in our community. You know, Barack Obama said we're the richest country in the world, everybody deserves a house. And that's true. And so the HEARTH Act, which was passed in 2009, changes the way that we provide services. So as an emergency shelter like Family House is, we have traditionally brought the families in, worked with them about, you know, with their crisis situation that they're in, given them a couple days to sort of acclimate to our community living environment.
What was it before then? If you said in 2009, with the implementation of that particular piece of legislation, you changed. So what did you move from to where you are now?
We're just now in 2012 getting the directives of what that HEARTH Act means.
I see. All right.
So right now we're changing our direction. So instead of bringing in a family into emergency shelter and giving them sort of the time to acclimate to communal living, giving them time to sort of adjust to their surroundings and then start a case plan, we're to ramp that up and do an exit strategy first, get them into housing, and then we're providing the services to them. So essentially, instead of providing the case management services and the support services inside the shelter, our directive is to get them into housing as fast as we can and then provide the assistance to them while they're in the house.
So what's the challenge here? Certainly no one's disagreeing that you need to provide shelter services, or are they?
Oh, I don't believe that's the case at all.
And we should say that your organization provides supportive services and not shelter.
No, we provide direct housing.
You do provide direct housing.
Many of Renee's families come to Focus. We provide the housing out in the community. We do a scattered site model. So we have no apartment buildings or any place that we own where people reside.
You're not a shelter.
Right.
That's right. That's what I meant
We're,
to say.
We're
You're
a permanent
not a shelter.
housing placement agency, and then we provide in-home case management services that wrap around the family. You know, the HEARTH Act was implemented when Housing and Urban Development, our big funder, recognized that there was more to homeless services than just providing shelter. That if people get permanently housed, they have a much better long-term outcome in terms of getting stabilized, and that's what the system is all about. And so the HEARTH Act put special considerations around money that this community has been getting since 1987, the McKinney-Vento money. And with that, there are new provisions because HUD has been looking at all this data that has been collected over these years and found out that standardizing how everyone is looked at in terms of what's created your housing crisis and how can we most effectively address those issues that have created the housing crisis.
Well, certainly nobody disagrees with that.
Right. Well, I don't disagree
with that.
There are people in the system that disagree that might not be the best way to manage having folks enter the system.
But right now, the discussion, the angst in this discussion is not about the provisions of the HEARTH Act as much as the implementation strategy?
Well, the fact of the matter is there has been a huge amount of money put into communities when the 2008 crash hit, and it's called Homelessness Prevention and Rapid Rehousing. It was a huge influx into communities to address issues of homelessness as quickly as possible. All that money is leaving communities, and what's left is only the money that has been traditionally in communities, with the proviso that all these new activities have to be funded. They have to be funded out of the existing funding sources. So that's where the angst and the tension and the issues are arising. We have to do the same
with less.
With less.
Absolutely. So in the case of Family House, for example, we've been, the city has recommended that we don't receive CDBG. However, with this rapid rehousing piece, we have to take a case manager from within the shelter that did case management with the families while they're in the shelter and put them on the outside of the shelter. So when the families move out, they have that support outside of the shelter. So if you think about it, it's very difficult to have a staff person inside the shelter and outside the shelter at the same time. So clearly we need extra funds to be able to adapt to these changes as given to us by the Hearth Act. So that's why Family House is really struggling with how to implement these changes, which again I think are important, but yet maintain the integrity of our service as well.
Well, where's the disconnect between you guys and your planning board? Is there a disconnect here? Because it seems as though you all are not on the same page with this.
I think that this is a seismic change for communities across the country. I mean, we are not unique. And in dealing with that seismic change, there has to be a whole lot of communication and a whole lot of discussion around what's the future look like. You know, how are we going to reapportion funds to address these core changes that are being required of us in order to receive over $4 million in just HUD money. That's matched by another $2 or $3 million from the state, and then our local funders as well.
But part of the discussion, I thought, was around at least the perception that the services would be lost to the community if the current process for allocating funds was allowed to move forward as the Department of Neighborhood has identified.
Well, from my perspective, you know, you would think that there would be less need for emergency shelter. Because if we're rapidly rehousing people in and out of the shelter, for example, Family House is a 90-day stay. So if our objective is 20 or 30 days to move people out of shelter and into permanent housing, you can see there'd be less need, in theory, for shelter beds, emergency shelter beds.
Well, Ms. Santiago has said that, and I'm actually quoting from a Blade article, Ms. Santiago has said that we certainly need shelters, we will always need shelters, they may just look a bit different. So you think she's not serious when she says that?
I think that she, you know, with the rapid rehousing piece that we're going through, I can see her theory that, again, yes, shelter beds are going to be essential. There'll always be homeless folks out there that need the shelter beds. But again, through the rapid rehousing piece, if people are moving in and out quicker, then we would have less of a need for as many shelter beds as we have in the city of Toledo. And again, I think that that's great on theory, but my concern for Family House is those folks that can't be rapidly rehoused.
And let me ask you, because I've read some commentary from HUD wherein they actually say that they support the rapid rehousing initiative, obviously, but they don't define how it gets implemented.
Exactly.
So who's coming up with the numbers?
Well, the numbers are all coming out of the data system, Homeless Management Information System, called HMIS.
The 30-day.
No, all of us that receive any kind of federal funds, that includes Emergency Solutions Grant or supportive housing, all those funding streams are now requiring everybody to enter client data.
And
so
the
they
HMIS,
are using that in trending. One of the things that this new paradigm is creating is a centralized, a new front door. And that new front door will look at families again and say, what will get you through your housing crisis as quickly as possible.
Okay, hold that thought. Okay. Right there. Don't forget it. We got to go away for just a second. We'll be right back. Please come back with us.